either side of us. I remember looking out the porthole thinking that I could touch the cliff with my hand, and man, if that pilot sneezes, we're going to see a smear on that cliff. But we were flying out to our base, which was Forward Operating Base Parnell, which was situated about 5 kilometers from the Pakistan border, separated by massive mountains on all sides. I remember we banked hard when we landed, kicked up a massive brownout of dust, a lot of noise and confusion, especially when helicopters are constantly landing and taking off. We were replacing a unit, so those soldiers were leaving, new soldiers were coming in. It was a frenzy of activity. And I remember thinking as we landed, man, this is one heck of a target of opportunity for the enemy. I mean, if I had an enemy camp up there in those hills, and I had a few rockets at my disposal, I'd attack right here, right now, when we're most vulnerable. Sure enough, not 30 seconds later, I heard this massive explosion off in the distance, over the din of the helicopter blades coming to, helicopters landing and leaving. Heard that explosion off in the distance, and I heard a rocket tear right over our head, and another massive explosion just to the east of our base. And I looked at my platoon sergeant, who was, in his 40s and had already been in situations like that. I didn't know what to do. I looked at him and I'm like, what the hell do we do? And he looked at me like with this incredulous look on his face, like, sir, we're under fire. Go take cover now. So I was like, okay. I ran as fast as I could to the base. And I learned very quickly that, yes, we were operating at 10,000 feet, like Mile High Stadium times 2. Lungs were burning, muscles were aching, rockets were flying over our head and landing just east of our base. They were just overshooting, or just west of our base. They were just overshooting us. I knew that if they adjusted slightly, those rounds would start landing right among us. And I get to the base and I just stood there. Everybody's running everywhere. I had non-commissioned officers running to the Tactical Operations Center, knowing that we had to call higher because we were under attack. I had non-commissioned officers that ran to the aid station, knowing that, hey, we're under attack. Like, we should anticipate casualties. And then I had Captain Ryan Kennedy, who was a 173rd Airborne paratrooper, in charge of that base before we got there. He goes, hey, Sean, we got to get to the front gate right now. I'm like, why? What's going on? He goes, some children got hit with those rounds. Like those rockets that landed east of our position hit a school in a playground and wounded a bunch of children. And so I looked at him and he looked at me, and I dumped my gear, threw off my body armor, dropped my helmet, put my rifle in the sand, and I ran as fast as I could to the gate to help. That's all I thought that was my way of helping at the time. I got to the gate and the weirdest thing happened. Another one of those surreal moments that only combat can expose you to. We had crying and angst-filled Afghan parents holding the broken and bloody body children, aged 2 through 6, in their arms, all bleeding to death. Some with some pretty terrible wounds. And I get to the gate, and our interpreter is arguing with the Afghan fathers. And so that the Afghan parents would not give us their children to be treated unless we promised them that we would treat the boys first. Not something that as an American you're used to dealing with. In this country we protect our kids. That's just how it goes. Kids aren't supposed to get hurt, right? Combat shakes all that up. Innocent people get hurt, kids die. It's how it's been for thousands of years. And so, as Americans, we watched this argument unfold for a few seconds. And so we had it. We just grabbed children and ran as fast as we could back to the aid station. Boy and girl alike. I remember I ended up scooping up this little girl, and I remember looking down at her, and man, she was screaming, she was crying, and she was trying to talk to me in Pashto, and I'm trying to comfort her in American, in English, and I'm trying to comfort her with words that she just didn't understand at all. I just scooped her up and I ran her for the aid station as fast as possible, following and calling the soldiers that were running before me. And I remember about halfway there, looking down at my uniform, I'm holding this little girl and she's screaming. And I'm like, oh my gosh, I've been hit. I feel warmth on the side of my body. I'm like, I probably been shot. Look down, sure enough, my whole right leg is covered in blood. But as I looked further, I realized that it wasn't my blood, it was her blood. And that her leg was missing beneath the knee. So, first day of combat, first day in Afghanistan. I rushed her to the aid station as fast as I possibly could. And as we approached the aid station, I was in shock. Basically, at the time, I didn't know, my mind wasn't working. I main goal was to get her to that aid station as fast as possible. And I realized that as I was approaching the door, that she wasn't screaming anymore. And I looked down, and 5 steps prior to me getting her to the dock, she had died in my arms. The first day. I didn't know what to do at the time, but I basically held her in my arms and I walked her back to her parents. And I gave her lifeless body to her father, and he just shared this stare with me, just nodded his head, and he turned around and walked away. And so I was in shock. I just thought to myself, the only thing that I could think at the time was I got to get this uniform off of me. And so I went back to my newly assigned room. I dumped my uniform on the floor. I just didn't want to see it anymore. Threw on some PTs, and I said, I'm going to go to the gym and blow off some steam. And then round to the gym, talked to Captain Kennedy again. He comes up and puts his arm on me and he says, hey Sean, how you doing? I'm like, well, how do you think I'm doing, sir? And he goes, hey man, you're just going to have to hang tough. He said, this is Afghanistan. He said, their goats mean more to them than their kids. And then he said, they can always have more kids. And he patted me on the back and he walked away. See, Ryan Kennedy had already experienced a year of moments like that. He was already a hardened combat veteran. He had already had a protective shell around him after seeing the horrors of war for a year. And see, all the shooting in the world, all the moving, communicating, running, training as a collective unit for war, none of that matters. None of that can prepare you for a moment like that. It shakes you to your core as a human being. So I remember going back to my room, scooping up that uniform. I didn't want anything to do with that stateside uniform. When I got to Afghanistan, it was clean. First day, covered in blood. Took it out to the burn pit, threw it in there, and burned it. And I remember thinking to myself, not at the time, but years later, that really was the start of a metamorphosis inside me. To that the burning of that uniform, the shedding of my stateside skin, as it were, and the move from an insulated citizen to a hardened combat veteran began right there in that moment. Eventually, after 485 days of combat, I would become a man like Ryan Kennedy. And that's what 485 days of close combat. Saw things like that almost every day. My base was hit with 3,000 plus rockets. 485 days, as I said, just to put that in perspective. Easy Company, the 101st Airborne, jumped into D-Day, fought the Hitler's Eagles Nest in less time than 485 days. We never left the front lines, never rotated out, all but for 2 weeks of R&R. And we fought like hell for 16 months of our lives. But the real war for me, I think one of the most difficult journeys for me was trying to come home after that. I'd come home and I'd talk to my parents, and I could feel very clearly that I looked the same, but they didn't recognize their son anymore. And so the first thing I did was like, hey, let me link up with those buddies that I knew in college, and let's go have a few beers. You know, they wanted to welcome me home. And when I got to their apartment, I realized that nothing had changed. Same Star Wars posters on the wall, you know. And they're still having the same discussions about, hey, it's Thirsty Thursday. What beer are we going to drink tonight? Where are we going to go? And it was always the same damn place in the south side of Pittsburgh, Casey. And so I'm thinking to myself, oh my God, I'm not the same person. I've changed completely. These are guys that I've known since I was a kid, and I don't know them anymore. And so we went to Casey's that night. We were sitting around tables like you're sitting around, just having a few beers, and they were asking me about my deployment. And of course, I got the, did you kill anyone? And I mean, if there are veterans in this room, I'm sure, I guarantee you every single veteran has gotten that question at least once. I don't know why. See, it seems crazy when Louise is like, hey, don't say, did you kill? Everyone's like, oh my gosh, how could you say that? Every veteran gets that question at least one time. I promise you that. When I got that question we were talking about, the conversation led to that little girl on my first day. And within moments of me telling that story, I realized that the mood around the table had become depressed. Some of my buddies got up and left. Some went to get, the bathroom, drink a few beers. And I realized, and again, I didn't realize it at the time, but I thought about that moment for years. I realized that my story of war and combat was hurting my buddies. It's hurting them. And so why do veterans join the nation? Join the military? Well, I think they join the military because they love their family, they love their friends, and they love the country, and want to protect them. They want to defend them against the horrors that exist in this world. And when I saw that my story of the war was hurting the people that I had sworn to defend, that I raised my right hand and took an oath to defend, I realized that I wasn't going to compromise that oath, and that I would not talk about war anymore around people that I knew couldn't take it. So I locked it away inside me. And for years, it ate away because I couldn't share it with people. The only people I could share it with were the buddies that I was either there with, or other veterans that had understood or been in combat, like-minded individuals that I knew could take it. And so, Sitting Bull has this great metaphor that I had read years later of warriors returning from combat. Whether they were fighting the U.S. Army or neighboring tribes, he said his warriors would return from combat with a pack full of stones. And they were not allowed to reintegrate back into the tribe until they fully disclosed their experience of war, the good, the bad, and the ugly. So that tribe could hear it and understand what that warrior went through. And then in turn take those stones out of that backpack one at a time to evenly distribute the burden amongst the tribe so that they could help that warrior carry that pack. And for how amazing this country, we all love this great nation that we live in. We all love our veterans. But we can do more. We can do more to help our warriors come home. We can do more to help them carry that pack. And so people ask me all the time, well, like, what can I do? I hear from, especially World War II, Korea, Vietnam family members who are like, I never even knew he served. We found his medals after his funeral. I didn't know that he had a Purple Heart. My father was a Vietnam veteran. He never told me anything about his experience. I've been estranged from him for 50 years. Had I just known what he'd gone through, maybe things would have been different. So I would say, how do you bridge that gap? The onus is on both parties, but I think as productive and responsible citizens, we as realtors and as citizens of this nation have to take the first step. Hey, look, I know I don't know what you've been through. There's no possible way I will ever understand. But I need you to know, whether you tell me today or 10 years from now, that I can take it. And whenever you choose to tell me, I'll be there. I promise it won't hurt me, because it's my responsibility to know what we put you through on our behalf. And that veteran, most of the time, the veteran will be, yeah, whatever, I got it, whatever, no big deal. But eventually, I promise you, they will talk to you. Might be a week, might be a month, might be a year, might be 10, but they will talk to you. And so, don't, as real estate agents, underestimate the impact and the role that you have in bringing back our veterans. Who do you think the first person that I talked to getting out of the Army was? A real estate agent. Because I wanted to talk to an expert in the area so that I could find a home that I could raise my wife, raise my kids, and build a relationship with my wife, but not just a house, but a home in Anchorage.